Chapter 10. Metal Press. Tomás still found it strange to be in another body. Staggering, he got to his feet. Good thing he wasn't covered in dust like last time. On a small table, something new, sat his backpack and a fresh set of clothes. The boy checked the contents of the bag and smiled. Everything was there, including the address he had received from Lallaby, where someone was waiting to teach him. The set of clothes seemed new and of good quality. As he put them on, he realized they had been made for him, or at least for someone with only 2 arms. "Was it you who provided these clothes? I thought you couldn't leave here," he asked the heir, waiting for the spirit of Ka to respond. The boy didn't even consider the possibility that the entity might not be present, even though he hadn't been greeted yet. But there was no answer. Strange, he assumed the spirit would always be there. Now this was a problem. Tom couldn't read this people's language, let alone find his way around the city. Maybe this was the time to ask Trat for help. The Zaririan had offered to talk whenever he had the chance. Even so, Tomás didn't like the idea of seeking her out just to take advantage of her knowledge. But he couldn't think of another solution, not without the spirit of Ka to guide him. The right thing to do was to treat her very well as thanks for her help. Tom didn't know where Trat was, but that probably wasn't essential for the spell. If it was, that would be really stupid. All he had to do was clearly imagine the 2 of them connected by the line, and the message should be sent. As he concentrated to perform the spell, he already began to feel the energy flowing through his body, a soft and subtle sensation, quite different from the shocks he received on Earth. Tomás realized the connection had been made when the knot of the line on his wrist tightened. At that moment, he imagined the place where they had first met. The accumulated magical energy shot out like a breath on the back of his neck. He wasn't sure if it had worked, so he had no choice but to trust and wait. Who knows, maybe in the future he could send more complex messages. He just needed to get the hang of it. But that would come with time. With his backpack ready, Tomás set off toward the city. This was the first time he walked with the day breaking. Actually, it could be getting dark too, he wasn't sure. After walking a bit, he started to confirm that it was indeed very early, as little by little people were coming out to work in the fields or heading toward Bush Ka. A hurried Zaririan left one of the houses near the boy. He checked his bag before flying off with ethereal wings toward the city. This left Tom gaping. Incredible, he wanted to fly too. Noticing this trait of the people, the boy began to spot more and more figures cutting through the sky above his head. Not everyone did this. Some people created wings with some sort of spell to fly around. Seeing this, he finally realized that what he had previously thought were kites over the city were actually people and their colorful clothes. Smiling, he reached the meeting point, or what he hoped was. The day was already bright. He could even see Jantia rising on the horizon. He wondered how the diplomatic mission had gone, picturing those poor souls suffering under the G-force during the launch. He couldn't imagine anyone surviving the trip. Another point of doubt: how could a cannon shot hit its interplanetary target? The calculations for that must be insane, and he didn't believe these people were capable of that kind of math. Tomás sat waiting on one of the benches overlooking Bush Ka. The hustle and bustle of the metropolis on a regular day wasn't so different from what one would see in any city on Earth. Countless people going to and fro in all directions. Of course, you had to set aside the part about people flying. That made it clear he was in a fantastical place. Some time passed. He was almost about to give up on Trat'Zanel when the girl appeared, walking briskly. When she saw him, her smile was unmistakable. Tom still didn't know how to read this people's expressions precisely, but he was getting used to it. "It's been a while, Tomás. I thought I wouldn't see you again. I'm glad we could meet today." She wanted to touch his arm, maybe as a typical local greeting, but she held back. Tom didn't notice. "Oh, but it hasn't been that long. I think it's been 2 or 3 days since we saw each other, right?" he answered as he stood up. It had been 2 nights since he first met her. So naturally, he assumed the same amount of time had passed in this world. It had never occurred to him that time might flow differently here. No, of course not. It's been a whole season. She looked at him curiously. Trat had already found the boy a little odd before, but the situation was only getting stranger. Of course, deep down she didn't mind. She devoured him with her eyes, not daring to do more. Huh. Sorry then. My sense of time isn't great, he said awkwardly, with nothing else to say. Only now did he notice that the girl looked quite different from the last time he saw her. Her clothes were formal and her long hair was neatly braided around her head like a crown. She gave off a military impression. No problem. So what have you been up to all this time? Did you get lucky and learn more spells? She sat next to him and he sat back down too. Not really. I found someone to teach me, but I don't know how to get to the address. No problem, I can help you. Where do you need to go? Tom pulled out the paper and handed it to her. All right. It's a bit too early to take you there. Let's hang around here a bit longer. All right. He smiled at her as she tucked the address into her bag. Can I ask you something? Have you ever seen a shantanyn? Maybe Trat could help him with that too. Who knows? Maybe she'd even fought one. Seen one? That only exists in children's stories, she answered, laughing. She found the question funny. To her, a shantanyn was as real as Santa Claus. Really? He didn't recall that the spirit of Ka had said these creatures were considered legends in Zara. Of course. She covered her mouth to stifle more laughter. She found his question hilarious. Now let me ask you something. You don't know how to read, do you? Of course I do, he answered immediately, but then realized what she meant. But I don't know how to read the language here. How did you know? He asked, curious. There's something else written on the address you gave me. Really? What else is written? Intriguing. What else had Lallaby passed along? Oh, that you'll have to figure out on your own. She laughed again and stood up. Come on. I think if we walk slowly, we'll get there at a good time. Now that's going to be stuck in my head, he said, starting to walk with her. Forget that. I'd rather you think about me. I'm way more fun. She grabbed his hand and started leading him through the city. The walk with the Zaririan was pleasant, much better than wandering around alone. The two of them passed through several places the boy didn't recognize. Bushcar pulsed with life from every corner. Its narrow streets housed small shops, bars, and restaurants. Along the wider avenues, benches and tables were used by people for games and to catch up, as if they were in a plaza and not just on the street. In some areas, massive towers cut through the city's silhouette, with various colourful roofs and large balconies. Observing these structures, Tomás noticed entry and exit points for the flying inhabitants, allowing them to access the buildings without using the streets. The streets widened as they approached their destination. The many clustered houses and shops lining the alleys gave way to broad avenues and larger homes, with yards showcasing statues and luxurious vegetation. Unlike the areas he had seen until now. Divinity was very present in this region. Several statues of Ka decorated it. As he looked at one, very similar to the one that had first greeted him, he saw a strange shadow cross the street, something large flying over the city. Shielding his eyes from the sun, Tom glimpsed something that reminded him of a zeppelin being pulled by a winged serpent. The creature was very high up in the sky, making it hard to describe in detail from such a distance. He could distinguish its long, slender body, with 6 pairs of wings like those of a bat, and scales shimmering like a rainbow. The winged creature moved quickly and disappeared from view within seconds. This was the first time he'd seen anything like a vehicle crossing the city. The train didn't count. Trat, who had taken a few steps ahead, not realizing that Tom had stopped to stare at the sky, returned and grabbed his hand. We're almost there. Come on. She smiled, amused by the things that caught his attention. It's just, I've never seen anything like that before. Here in the city, it's pretty common. Some people prefer their cargo to be transported directly to avoid the risk of a spell going wrong. After crossing a few more buildings, Trat stopped in front of a house with a flower-filled yard. The typical yellow of the trees that spread everywhere gave way to the blood red of wild-looking flowers impeccably arranged in the garden. "This is it, Tom. We've arrived." There was a slight sadness in her voice. She wished it had lasted longer. "Thank you so much, Trat. I never would have made it here without your help." "No problem, it was really good to see you again," she smiled, touching his arm with one of her free hands. "Do you think it's okay if I just knock on the door? It won't be a problem?" he asked, hesitant, unsure about the customs of this culture. Was it normal to just show up like this? "I think it'll be fine." "All right, I guess I'll go then." "Before you go, you need to think of a way to thank me. You can't go that long without getting in touch again." She touched the same spot on his arm with her lower hand. "You're right, I really do need to thank you properly. I won't forget." "I love sweets and going out, so why don't you invite me out next time you're free?" Still holding his hand, Trat kissed his cheek. Then she pulled away a bit, releasing the boy. "Of course," he replied, dumbfounded. "I'm off. Good luck, Tom." She seemed to give him a wink, but he wasn't sure. "Thanks. See you later." Trat took a few more steps away, and then 2 wings emerged from her back. They didn't seem natural to her, but before he could get a better look, she flew away. Tomás stood in front of the house's entrance for a while, thinking about why he didn't have wings too. Flying around would make his explorations so much easier. After pushing that thought aside, he timidly walked up to the house's door. He wasn't in a peripheral neighborhood. On the contrary, whoever lived here was probably someone important. His notions of etiquette from Earth weren't very good, so he couldn't even imagine how much worse they were in this other world. He knocked on the door. He was already there, so that was what he had to do. A few moments later, someone answered. The Zaririan was short, his skin showed wrinkles and spots, likely someone older. On his bald head sat a small hat, comically perched at the top. His eyes were yellowish-brown, reminiscent of Lallaby's, but paler compared to the girls. The man looked him over intensely from head to toe before saying anything. He seemed suspicious. To break the tension of the strange situation, Tom began. "Good morning. My name is Tomás. I got your address from someone named Lallaby. She told me I could learn about spells here." The man's expression didn't change. He opened the door fully and gestured with both of his right arms for the boy to come in. The house's interior was spacious and with few partitions. Various flowers in every colour decorated the entrance hall. There was a staircase in one corner leading to the second floor, a table near some bookshelves. Paintings adorned the walls. The man shut the door and walked into another room, motioning for the boy to follow. There, he sat in an armchair and gestured for Tom to do the same. "My granddaughter told me about you." He paused for a moment but didn't stop analysing him. She was a bit vague. Now I understand why. "We only talked for a little while during—" Tom began but was interrupted. "Yes, during the train ride, until you teleported away without even saying goodbye." "Ah, well." Tomás had no idea what happened when he returned to his world. Apparently, the body he used teleported back to the room with the spirit of Ka. "I never thought that kind of travel was possible. I've heard stories, but with no basis. Looking at you, there's no doubt." The boy couldn't follow his reasoning. He didn't understand what the man meant. "Tell me, Tomás, where do you come from? Are you from Jantia?" he asked, extremely curious. "No, they call my world Earth." The man's eyes widened. "But I wouldn't really know how I ended up here." "Earth. Like the ground we walk on and plant in." "Yeah." Tom rolled his eyes internally. "How curious. I apologize for not introducing myself yet. My name is Temulo'Gaul." "Nice to meet you," he replied automatically. "Lallaby said you don't know which deity blessed you. Is that correct?" "We don't have deities on my planet. There are religions, but I've never seen anything like what I've seen here." "That seems impossible. There can't be life without a deity. They're responsible for the blessings we receive." Sometimes it seemed like he was talking more to himself than to the boy. "Here in Zara, There are 10 deities. We know that Jantir has only 2. It doesn't seem possible. He spoke softly. How do you perform spells on Earth? There's no such thing there. We do everything with science. Science? But science exists to explain how spells occur. Without spells, there's no science. No. What an absurd concept. Nature, no matter the world, behaves naturally. There is no magic. We use it to explain the universe's natural phenomena and how things work. You know. Fascinating. The Zaririan's eyes gleamed. It seemed like he hadn't had an interesting conversation in quite some time. I imagine so. But how did you know I'm not from here? This time it was Tomás who was curious. My family, of which Lallaby is a part, has a very strong connection to the healing arts. Even though Lallaby didn't follow that path, both she and I can see that this body is not truly alive. It's an extremely clever mimicry. He wanted to approach, to touch and study him, but his social tact was well developed. By itself, your body is the most fascinating thing I've ever seen. But the fact that you're from another world, that's even more incredible. So, she already knew that when she talked to me? Could that be why the girl sat next to him on the train? No. At least not the part about you being from another world. But Lallaby sensed you were special in some way. Alive, but without a heartbeat. Tom had never thought about whether this body had a heart, or where the food he ate went. During all his time in Zara, he'd never used a bathroom. Well, he paused, trying to figure out how to ask for help. I came here today because I need to learn how to perform spells, how to manipulate magical energy without hurting myself. Magical energy? I think you're referring to the flow of grace. Anyway, by itself, magical energy isn't capable of harming a physical body. Maybe, with an immense amount, something like that could happen. But I doubt it's actually possible, he countered, thinking about the calculations that would make such an outcome feasible. You can believe it happens. Since I started manipulating magical energy, my real body's all banged up. He remembered Susie's angry face after she freaked out from the message spell. Even getting hurt had been worth it. Incredible. I can't even fathom the amount of energy it would take for that, and it's not even worth teaching you recovery spells. You'd probably hurt yourself more casting them than you'd heal. Maybe, but if I could use them on other people, it might still be useful. Is your world very dangerous? Constant conflicts? I imagine so, without a deity to guide you. He tilted his head as if his assumption was obviously correct. Actually, no. There are dangerous places, sure, but overall it's pretty peaceful. The problem is a shantanyn that started hunting me. Temulo stopped his musings about Tom's world and focused on what the boy had said. A shantanyn. No, that couldn't be real. But if everything else was true, then maybe this was too. Otherwise, everything was a lie. Hard to believe that a creature from legend is real. He stared at him more seriously. Tom described to Temulo his encounter with the legendary beast, how it moved, and what he did to escape from his pursuer. The Zaririan listened carefully. Each new piece of information made his mind race through various possibilities, though it was hard to believe the boy. Temulo fell silent after Tom finished his story. He stretched his legs as he absorbed everything that had been said. Pondering deeply about what he was about to do, he stood up, walked over to a nearby table and began writing. When he finished, he handed the paper to the boy, his hands sweaty and trembling slightly. Memorize this spell and perform it when you encounter the creature again. He took a deep breath. If what you've told me is true, this will be the proof. Not to mention, it will help you in the confrontation. Tom looked at the paper, not understanding a thing written there, though it seemed complex. There's just one problem. I don't really know how to communicate with you. Reading's not part of the package. What package? Temulo asked, confused. I can't read your language. Ah, the joys of cultural differences. Not being understood was so annoying. That's a problem. Temulo crossed one of his arms while using another pair to scratch his chin. After a few seconds, he dashed out of the room, leaving Tom alone for a couple of minutes. When he returned, he held a book. I imagine you know how your own linguistic system works. Yeah, I have grammar classes all the time at school. I don't really like it, but I'm not bad at it. Great. Then today, you'll have your first lesson. He handed the book to the boy. Hold it with both hands and follow my instructions. They might seem a bit nonsensical, but it should work. If you manage to learn a spell from Trat'Zanel, you won't have a problem with one from Gaul. All right, go ahead. Tom was excited to learn something new. You need to feel the book as if it were an extension of your body. For that, you must sense the energy flowing from you into the book, enveloping it, then returning. Maybe it'll be easier if you imagine it as a liquid running down your arms, through your hands, into the book, and then coming back up through your feet. Tom held the book open in front of him and began concentrating. His hands embraced the object, feeling the grooves of the cover, the texture of the leather, its weight. He even noticed its slightly dusty smell. A light tingling that started at his fingertips spread through his body. It was the energy flowing. In some strange way, it all felt like second nature, as if merely intending to cast the spell already triggered an instinctive reaction. His arms bristled where he imagined the energy flowing, bathing the book. Soon his feet began to feel it too, grounding him heavier than before. Tell me when you feel the cycle repeating continuously. Tom didn't want to seem like some prodigy and immediately say he could feel it happening, so he waited a bit before nodding. All right. Very good. Keep that focus and repeat after me. O Gaul, grant me your divine grace. Let me spread your blessing through the world. May the knowledge here present proliferate. Tomás repeated the words as Temulo had pronounced them and immediately felt a strong pulse of energy surge from his hands. The pages followed the rhythm of Tom's grace, flipping like a belly dancer, moving all the way to the end in a magical sway, then returning to the beginning. Repeating several times until finishing with a pinkish flash that blinded the boy for several seconds. Temulo was already prepared for that. He had closed his eyes as soon as the process started. Laughing at the boy's temporary blindness, he took the book from his hands and placed it on the table. You did very well. I didn't think you'd manage on the first try. He sat down again. You could have warned me that was going to happen. Tom rubbed his eyes. They still stung a bit. It wouldn't have been any fun if I had, so... How was it? Did it seem easy? It was different from the message spell. With that one, I can visualize more easily what's going to happen and the outcome. But with this, I had no idea what to expect. And I still don't know what it's for. It's not like he'd absorbed the book's contents. He could even visually recall some pages, but he couldn't understand anything. I understand. I didn't actually mention it, but this spell is very common in Gaul's libraries. It's used to make copies of books. Now, the contents of that book are stored in your mind, and you can take it back to your world and study our language. Temulo smiled as if he had just solved all the boy's problems. Tom heard the explanation and practically face-planted, the idea of studying their language when he didn't even know how to read it. Disbelieving, he put a hand to his face and sighed, containing his frustration. But I can't read. How am I supposed to study it if I have no idea how to read this? He responded, astonished. Well, Temulo hadn't thought about that. It was so strange talking to someone who clearly spoke his language, but at the same time, didn't. But with this knowledge, I'm sure you'll figure something out. He laughed awkwardly. No. I need a Rosetta Stone or something. I don't know. Or magic. There must be a translation spell. He was already muttering to himself. Rosetta Stone? The earthly reference piqued the Zaririan's curiosity. In my world, there's an ancient stone with the same text in 3 different languages. Scholars used it to understand an ancient language that no one speaks anymore. Fascinating. Incredible. that a people would develop a language and then lose it. That's inconceivable in a world with deities. Yeah, but do the deities all speak the same language? No, of course not. Then what's different? If one day a certain people no longer exists, their language can vanish or change the same way. Unthinkable. Deities are eternal. He answered categorically, though deep down he knew that wasn't entirely true. Tom immediately realized it wasn't worth arguing with religious radicals, no matter the world. All right, but setting that aside, what do I do to recover this knowledge in my world, the copy? Ah, yes, very important for you to know that too. He returned to the reality of the conversation. You must have a blank book and imagine the knowledge leaving you and filling this new vessel. While speaking, Tomás was so engrossed in the conversation that he hadn't noticed the sound of his alarm going off in the background for quite some time. When he realized it was already too late, his eyes were open in bed with his mother touching his forehead. You didn't wake up on time. I thought you might be sick, she said, smiling as she left the room. Now get up and get ready quickly. Your breakfast's already on the table. It was Saturday, a day when no one should be rushed out of bed. Tom got up, still groggy, completely exhausted. His last few nights of sleep had been visits to the planet Zara, so he felt like he hadn't really rested at all, not to mention the images of the copied book flashing through his mind. Maybe he needed to get them down on paper soon, like Temulo had said. The problem was he didn't know how.